Timothy Goes to School is a Canadian children's cartoon which premiered in September of the year 2000. It follows the story of a young raccoon and his friends attending kindergarten. Now it's a common theme for the main character of a show to be presented as the protagonist but actually have many of the same traits as the antagonist. A good example of this is Tori Vega from Victorious. So, let's dive into why I believe Timothy himself is the villain of Timothy Goes to School. I'm also gonna ignore the fact that this lil guy is only supposed to be 5 years old, because it's way more fun to be dramatic. The reasoning behind Timothy's behavior, which I'll get to in a minute, can all be explained in the very first episode. The series begins with the first day of school. The main conflict of this episode is that each day, Timothy gets made fun of for what he's wearing by another character named Claude. Claude is set up to be our actual protagonist. He's outwardly mean and selfish, and it's made obvious to us that we're not supposed to like him. Each day, Timothy puts all his energy into finding an outfit that Claude will like, in order to avoid the bullying. This conditions his mind into seeking and craving Claude's approval. This becomes a problem when his obsession with his bully leads him to mirror his behavior and, in turn, hurt others. Another quick thing I'd like to point out, and this is definitely a reach, but, by the end of the episode, Timothy and Claude show up to school in the exact same shirt. To me, this is symbolic of the fact that after all this obsession, Timothy has finally become just like Claude. The blue and white striped t-shirt worn here becomes Timothy's signature outfit that he wears from here on out. Okay, on to the evidence. My first example is part 2 of episode 1 titled Yoko. Yoko is another one of our main characters. She is a kind-hearted cat from Japan. She is kinda portrayed to be Timothy's first and best friend, so you would expect him to always stand up for her, right? In this episode, we see all the children enjoying their lunch and trading food. However, Yoko has brought in sushi and no one wants to trade with her because all they eat is white bread, which obviously upsets her. She asks Timothy why this is the case, to which he responds, "The problem with your favorite food is that it's no one else's favorite." He is actually the first person to say something negative to her. This is not the response I would expect from a good friend. The whole class then goes on to ridicule her, saying that her food looks and smells gross. Doris, being her dramatic self, even claims that she saw the sushi moving. Girl, the fish is raw, not alive. I'd also like to point out that they were complaining about the smell of her food when Timothy literally brought in an egg salad sandwich. Of course, Timothy is not the only one to blame here, but he has a responsibility as Yoko's best friend to defend her. Seeing how upset she is, Mrs. Jenkins, who, by the way is the best character, tries to remedy the situation. She decides to hold an International Food Day, where everyone brings in a dish from their culture and shares it with the class. The rule for the day is that everyone must try a bite of everything. Despite this rule, nobody eats any of Yoko's food. When Yoko shows Timothy what she has brought in for everyone to try, he says, "That smells good." This glimpse of hope for Yoko is quickly crushed when he reveals that he was talking about someone else's food. This broke my heart for a second time. Why would you get somebody's hopes up like that? Truly evil. You can literally see Yoko's eyes light up when she thinks that her best friend is finally on her side. Timothy then proceeds to abandon Yoko on the spot in pursuit of literally every other food available. What really pushes it over the edge for me is that even at the end of the episode where Timothy finally tries a piece of sushi, his reasoning is that he is so hungry that he will eat anything. That definitely seems like quite a catty thing for a raccoon to say. After finally giving sushi a try, he discovers that he actually really likes it. I don't know if this can even be considered redemption. There was no apology. No, I was wrong. My guy was just hungry enough to pretend to be a decent person. Even though he was being so backhanded, Yoko still immediately treats him with kindness and even shows him how to use the chopsticks correctly. The next episode I want to talk about is Season 1 Episode 6 Part 2 titled Team Project. Mrs. Jenkins announces that the class will form groups to complete a project and that the winning team will get a special prize. We then cut to recess, where they clearly set up the audience's expectations for the pairings by showing Timothy and Yoko playing together. They pair up for a game of leapfrog and Timothy even says, "We make a great team." Then, he spots Claude across the playground, reading a book under a tree. I'd like to note that Claude is minding his own business at this point and that Timothy is the one who approaches him. The book Claude is reading has a rocket ship on the cover which Timothy claims he's very interested in. I don't doubt that he likes them, however, I don't know if I believe that it's the reason he came over. There's no way he saw the cover from all the way across the playground. My guess is that this is another manifestation of his obsession with Claude. Now it's time for everyone to choose their partners for the project. When Timothy is asked to choose his partner, he hesitates, looking back and forth between Yoko and Claude. Yoko is looking back at Timothy, clearly indicating that she'd like to work with him. Meanwhile, Claude is not acknowledging him at all, he's still reading his book. Despite it being the easiest decision to make, this dummy still picks the wrong option and chooses Claude, which obviously upsets Yoko. Since Yoko has been left without a partner, Mrs. Jenkins suggests that she join Lily and Charles, to which she enthusiastically agrees. Timothy looks over at her. What gets me is that this is the first moment he starts to feel regret. Not when Yoko is visibly sad, but when she shows that she's okay without him. Timothy won't choose her, but he still wants her to choose him. Over at Claude's house, they begin their project, a space shuttle. Claude won't let Timothy participate at all. And though this isn't a nice thing to do, he never wanted to work with Timothy in the first place. It's clear now that Timothy displays this clingy behavior only when a person doesn't want him, whether that be Claude or Yoko. Timothy begins to realize his mistake as Claude keeps brushing him off and ignoring his ideas. The space shuttle ends up winning the special prize, which Timothy doesn't care about anymore. He goes and sits at a table alone and feels sorry for himself even though it's his own fault. This is when Yoko comes over and comforts him. She doesn't feel bitter that Timothy abandoned her, and she doesn't gloat about how it blew up in his face. She is just there for her friend. She's the one who got screwed over, and yet, she's the one to make the first move to fix their friendship. Compare this to the half-assed comfort he provided for her on International Food Day. This is now the second time Timothy has failed to apologize for his actions or even realize that what he did was wrong. He never cared about the pain she felt because of him, he's just extremely possessive over her. Another example of this possessive behavior can be found in episode 10 part 2, titled Forever Friends. We open with Timothy and Yoko playing together at Yoko's house. Yoko continues to demonstrate how good of a friend she is, even through the smallest acts, like remembering that he doesn't like raisins. They are interrupted when another classmate, Grace, enters and reminds Yoko that they have an extra dance lesson that day. We can see that this upsets Timothy a little bit. His frustration grows when Yoko can't hang out after school like they usually do every Tuesday, again because of rehearsals with Grace. Rehearsals are getting more intense as the recital gets nearer. It's obvious to everyone except Timothy's dumbass that Yoko is just honoring a commitment and that it's nothing personal. However, as usual, Timothy makes himself the victim. He literally says, "She doesn't like me anymore, she found something better to do." The fact that Timothy jumps to this conclusion shows how self-centered he is, and also his deep insecurity. He's already trying to blame Yoko. Yoko calls Timothy and asks him to meet her after school the next day. This leads to a misunderstanding as Timothy thinks this means Yoko wants to play with him, but she just wanted to see him for a moment to invite him to the recital. I feel a little bad for Timothy here, but it seems like an honest mistake both ways. Feeling even worse now, Timothy invites Charles over to play. Yoko comes up to him and says that rehearsal that day has been cancelled so she's free to play. Timothy rejects her offer and says that he already has plans with Charles. What I don't understand is, why can't they all play together? He repeats this the next day too. This pettiness and the way he's treating Yoko right now is the exact opposite of the way he treated her in the team project. When Timothy feels abandoned, he retaliates. When Yoko felt abandoned, she put her feelings aside and chose to be the bigger person. It's this pattern again with Timothy where he always needs to be chasing Yoko and then pushing her away. The ending of this episode is actually very sweet though. Timothy goes to watch Yoko's recital and gives her some flowers, which is just so adorable. Timothy's insecurity is clear in episode 5 part 2, titled The Sleepover. On the school bus, he points out that Claude's bike doesn't have training wheels. He seems very impressed by this until a few people laugh and say that training wheels are for babies. He instantly disregards his initial opinion and laughs along with them. When he gets home, he finds out that Frank and Frank, the twin bulldogs in his class, are staying the night. By the way, I think it's hilarious that they named them Frank and Frank. Upon hearing about the sleepover, Timothy asks his mother to not use the plates and cups that he actually likes, in case Frank and Frank think he's a baby. Timothy is so desperate to fit in with people that he copies everything that the Franks do, like how they eat and speak. His main issue in this episode is that he's embarrassed that he needs his toy penguin to fall asleep. He tries his best to hide it, but it turns out that Frank and Frank also have toys that they sleep with. This is a very harmless example of Timothy's need for validation. I've just included it to show that this is a major part of Timothy's personality. The problem arises when this leads him to hurt others. I believe this is now enough to prove that Timothy definitely has a few things he could work on. I hope you have enjoyed this video of me criticizing a cartoon raccoon for 10 minutes. Thank you for watching.